the 5th of June. Yes, we're well into June now. I'm Kevin Hoare, and Monday night here we have a special treat. We have State Representative Ed Diehl. He hails from District 17, and I think I tried to describe the district based on what it said in your. It's like East Salem to Turner to Detroit, and then Edina. And
Idana.
Sorry, say that again.
Idana.
Yeah. There's still every once in a while, because I'm not a native Oregonian, I get some of these wrong. But I get I can tell when someone says Tigert or Willamette or
Willamette Valley. Yeah.
That's right.
Right. So I live in Scio, and everybody sees that sign going down the freeway. They think SC10 is what it looks like.
Oh, SC10. Yeah. I think of that one. Actually, I've known Scio for quite a while, because I believe that is where Connections Academy, the origin of that was
in Scio?
That school district. I believe so, because they had to have a school district to launch a virtual charter school.
Yes, they had. That's right. I didn't know. I knew they had a charter school program, but I didn't connect that with Connections Academy. That's great.
They were the first one. They got enough control on a school board to vote it into existence, and boom. Now here we are. I don't know. It must be 15 years later since that was founded, and now parents really fight to keep these things as options for them, especially some of the homeschool parents.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us here tonight. I mean, there's just so much attention focused on what's happening in the state legislature, in no small part due to the fact that there's the walkout on the Senate side.
Yeah.
Which I know Senator Knopp has said, and if we hadn't walked out, they probably wouldn't be paying attention to this stuff in the media that's being kind of shoved down everyone's throats. But you're right in the midst of it. The House has some of the bills that have really been at least catalysts for what's happening, right? And then, of course, there's the whole issue that they're making in the Senate about this 1979 law, which states that you actually they have to be written in such a way, the bills, that someone with an 8th grade reading level could comprehend them. And from what I've read, these bills, especially some of the ones most under scrutiny, can't even be understood unless you have a postgraduate degree in the thing that the bill's about.
It's a flesh readability score. And so the bill summary has to be read basically at an 8th grade reading level. So you can go online, you can cut and paste any of these bill summaries into this browser website and get a flesh readability score on it. And none of our bills pass that. In fact, I took the simplest 3-sentence summary bill that I had, and it didn't even pass that. So,
Well, and it's important because some of these bills are being written in such a way that even if you pass them, you can't figure out what's in them.
No. House Bill 2002 is a great example of that. And I've had people still arguing with me about what the content of that bill is. But that's one of the bills. That's probably the primary bill that spurred the walkout on the Senate side.
So why don't we talk about that one a little bit? Because that's front and center. And you've spoken to this bill, obviously, in the House, because that was the origin of the bill is the state House, which has not walked out, but has certainly been a place where this debate's been pretty serious. And there's a lot of people that, the media seems to be going right along with the Democrats and calling it gender affirming care and a protection for abortion rights that aren't even under threat.
No, this is Oregon. Abortion's not under threat in Oregon. And so, with the press, I knew it was bad, but it is very one-sided. It is very one-sided. And on the gender issue, they are not interested in having an open discussion on that issue and talking to people on the other side. And there's very thoughtful people on the other side of that debate that do not believe that our kids should be having hormone treatments and puberty blockers and surgeries. They're not in a place to give informed consent. And we're doing harm. We know we're doing harm to kids. So, but
irreversible harm, right? I mean,
irreversible harm to kids. Yes. Yeah. And I had some folks testify. They were young adults in Oregon that had these surgeries and regretted it, and gave passionate testimonies. But it fell on deaf ears.
Well, it seems that this subject is being seen one way by the media and by the people running the state, particularly the ones running the state legislature. But it's not really that way even in the whole world, because we usually get told, well, but in Europe, they do things differently. And it turns out that Finland, Sweden, the UK, and Norway are banning these sex changes for children, for minors.
They are. They have done a systematic review of the evidence. They've looked at it and they've concluded that this isn't doing any good. In fact, it might be doing more harm than good. And they've documented that there are people who detransition. If you don't know what that is yet, that's somebody who's had these sex alteration procedures and then realizes it was a mistake and tries to go back. Now that you really can't go back, but they socially detransition. If they can reverse the surgery, they reverse that. But so Norway is one of the more recent ones that announced this, and they're still doing it, but they're bringing it back into a research setting. In other words, they're saying, you know what? We've looked at this data. We've tried this for a while. We don't think this is really working yet. We don't have good data on it yet. This is an experiment. So bring it back into a research setting. So while these guys are looking at this data, and Sweden probably has the longest term view of like suicidality and suicide, and looked at a number of patients over many years and basically determined, this, what our concern is that these kids are going to commit suicide if we don't do these affirming care treatments on them immediately. That's a myth. That is not the case. And Sweden has probably the best long-term evidence for that. But they're backing off on this. And Oregon, on the other hand, is going full steam ahead.
Yeah.
And bypassing a lot of the gatekeeping that really limits the number of kids that should end up seeing this treatment. So we've seen the number of young adults and children that are pursuing this care just really skyrocket, the number of kids that are pursuing it. At the same time, we've kind of loosened up the gatekeeping. This is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And I think lawsuits will be flying.
Well, and if they want to say, well, it's just a bunch of stodgy conservatives that can't keep up with the times, you mean the ones in in Norway, Sweden, the UK, Finland?
Oh, they're all more conservative countries. Yeah,
not
they're
really.
They're the ones that developed this treatment.
If there's anybody you should learn from,
it's
somebody who tried it, had these intentions, and then are saying, whoa.
And Kevin, I have heard from so many parents and other concerned people, and this is not a right-wing thing or a left-wing thing. This is an American thing. This is an Oregon thing. It is across the spectrum. I've heard from conservatives and progressives, very liberal people. I've heard from straight people and lesbians. I've heard from transgender people who will tell you what we're doing with kids is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. It's dangerous. It's harming kids. And they're condoning. They're not saying you shouldn't do it. Some people do need these kinds of treatment in their view, but it should not be done until they're old enough to consent.
Yeah.
And that's really the issue.
Yeah, and they've tried to frame it as life-saving surgery, but I came across a pretty good article. You might know him as well. A friend of mine, Steve Dole, sent to me, Crime Victims United, and he just came across this. Says, take a look at this, and it was the analysis of the studies they rely upon to claim that this is empirically life-saving, when in fact they the studies that they relied upon to assert these things have actually been withdrawn. When you withdraw a study, that's a big deal. That means, oops, this didn't meet the standard of research. And this article goes on to analyze that, and I'm like, so why does somebody think that they can just ignore other countries that have tried it, research that was faulty, and then maybe common sense somewhere in there, and then on top of it, because if a consenting adult wants to go do something really crazy like this, that's their business, right? But
Yeah.
minor,
A minor who is adamant, this is the classic story. A young girl comes in and she's just adamant. She's convinced herself that she needs this. And the parents feel helpless. And then they go to a therapist, and the therapist is trained to affirm the child. And if you've heard some of the folks that do this, they'll tell you, if a child says they're trans, do you affirm them? And the answer is yes. Well, that's not. Where's the critical review? Where's really diving in to see what's really an issue for this child? And that's being bypassed in the case of this so-called gender affirming care, which is very sad. So they're not getting the kind of mental health treatment and mental health assessments that they should be getting.
And that is actually the higher priority, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I mean, if there's a lot of things that go on in adolescent years, and a lot of confusion can exist with one's own sexuality. That happens. That's not new. I did see, it was Dave Rubin, who's gay, but went from being a Clinton supporting Democrat to a conservative who still holds some socially liberal views. And he's like, here's the problem I have with it. They're telling effeminate boys that they are transgender. They got to get surgery.
Yes. There is some homophobia involved in this.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. It is. And it's sad. I really feel for these kids who are going through this, and they're not getting the adequate care that they deserve and that their parents deserve. So we have a real battle on our hands. I do feel that there's some momentum, that people are waking up in the United States, that what we're doing is not helping. They're looking at what Europe's doing, who's been at this a bit longer than us. And I've spoken to some therapists. One therapist in particular who studied over there. She studied the methods, and she opened a clinic in the United States years ago. And she's very familiar with what's going on in Oregon, and she'll tell you that what we're doing in Oregon is wrong. We are not following standards of care that make sure that the kids that go through this process are really thoroughly vetted and the gatekeeping is there.
Yeah, there was, I think I saw it on your Facebook page. There was something that you had shared. It was a YouTube video with somebody by the name of Jamie Reed.
Yes.
And it's on YouTube, so anybody, I can post it here. Says, I thought I was saving trans kids. And she was somebody that had actually started, was a provider of these services, guiding people. And if she's got something to say about this, I think this is worth listening to.
So that affidavit, the Jamie Reed affidavit, she was at Washington University in St. Louis. That is a must reading. And I've been told by some folks that what she describes at Washington University in St. Louis, what's going on in Oregon is worse.
Jeez.
The sad thing is that there's folks that are not willing to speak out publicly on this issue. Some of them will, but many of them won't. I'm hoping that I'm really looking for somebody like Jamie Reed that's on the inside here to speak up and be brave enough and comfortable knowing there's a lot of people in Oregon that don't agree with what's going on, and that person will find support. And I'm really hoping that somebody like that is willing to speak out.
It's important because also I don't remember where I saw it today, but I did see like of the deluge of headlines, which I'm just amazed how many headlines are talking about transgender and surgeries and all that, not just in Oregon, but just across the country. And they're going after some of the therapists who say they will not comply with just affirming somebody that believes they need surgery and are transgender. And they're going to go after them. They're going to destroy the careers of the people who don't immediately comply, which
I know one of those therapists in Oregon, and Stephanie Wynn. She's pretty outspoken on this, but she was threatened with her license because she did not affirm. So it's not a neutral. Now that I've had people tell me that we're taking this neutral position, not one way or another. It's not, in practice, it's not that way. In fact, in practice, a lot of the people that are referring patients to these clinics, like at Dornbeckers, Oregon Health Sciences University, Legacy, the people that are doing these referrals are not trained in this. They're given a form from the hospital, and they're given instructions on how to fill the form out so that their patient gets the care that the patient wants. There's the gatekeeping is severely lacking.
It's zero. Yeah. Which, so when I think about this, that in addition to canceling parents, and then HB 2002 also, a bunch of us have decided that it's the Sex Trafficker Enabler Act because of what it does with regard to being able to cover up for pregnancies that result from sex trafficking and rape, right?
Yeah, it allows a young girl to get an abortion at any age without parental consent or knowledge. In fact, they wrote it in such a way that the child has to give written permission to contact the parent. You know, I could think of a lot of ways to write it, but I would write it, what kind of society do you want? You want a loving family that's there to support that child. Why don't you write a bill that reflects how you envision society functioning? But this is written for the least common denominator, as if every parent is bad and every child needs to be protected from their parent. And the truth is, I think, Kevin, if a young girl comes in and she's, you know, something happened, she's scared, embarrassed, she's probably not going to want to reach out to her parents. She's going to want to hide this, especially if she's a young girl. And if she's just surrounded by doctors and other people that are encouraging her to do that, she won't reach out to her parents. Now, some doctors say, well, no, we're going to push and make sure the parents are involved. But ultimately, it rests with the child, an immature child who's not making good decisions. And House Bill 2002 is an atrocious bill.
Who can't, by the way, get a tattoo on their own.
You can't get it. Yeah, it's in the bill too. It's funny. You read the bill, and the law that it edited talks about you have to be 18 or you have to get your parents' permission to get a tattoo. And then it goes on. It says you can be sterilized at 15 without parental consent, and you can have an abortion at any age without parental consent. But make sure for an ear piercing or a tattoo, you make sure you get your parental consent.
Wow. There's nothing less than the right of a family to function, to exist. and not to be categorically canceled.
Yeah.
Because if they can do it with this, then I think they just need another reason. Like maybe I go and I have a conversation with my daughter about how my view on climate change, and before you know it, she has to give written permission for me to talk to her on the subject or whatever. It's just, I don't see any limit. Once this limit is crossed, what's next?
Well, yeah, I don't even want to go there. It's what's next. But if a 15-year-old, let's say the age of medical consent in Oregon is 15, and a 15-year-old therefore can get these gender altering procedures without parental consent, what else can they do? And if they're giving the child, if they're affirming a young child to get puberty blockers, they're basically leaving it on a child right before they enter puberty. Are you trans? Okay, well then we'll give you this. If you're leaving that decision to a child, what other decisions could they decide to have if they're old enough or mature enough to have sex with an adult?
Yeah.
And I bring that up because there are people that will make that case.
As soon as this is done, they'll start making that case.
There are people that make that case. Sadly, there's an effort to normalize pedophilia.
Yeah.
As well.
Jeez. Yeah, it boggles the mind. And I think, and this is just one bill, okay? I mean, there's so many bad bills, but this one kind of brings into focus why you have to understand what that bill is saying. You actually have to have a thorough and courageous public debate, right? And that's being just canceled.
Well, it is. The press is not willing to give it a debate. We had, just picture this, there were all these Republicans that voted against this bill, and we spoke passionately and logically against this bill for 11 hours, I think. There was one Republican that voted for the bill, who gets interviewed by OPB, who gets interviewed by the Capitol Chronicle. They're not interested in talking to anybody that's opposed to the bill and hearing a case and hearing the data that would argue against this bill.
Yeah, they're campaigning. The media is campaigning.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, there's a lot of good stuff. A lot of stuff that comes out of the House and the Senate is fairly bipartisan, and the Senate Democrats are willing to put everything, stop everything in its tracks for basically this bill, the gun bill, and then this other Senate joint resolution bill. Stop everything.
Yeah.
In support of these very extreme, partisan, divisive bills that nearly half the state doesn't like. In fact, the majority of Oregonians don't think we should be doing gender affirming treatments on minors. So in some cases, it's a majority of Oregonians are against elements of these bills. Why shut down the legislature for these extreme divisive things when we have so many things that we have in common? And that's something I really ran on, and I wanted to focus on, is finding that common ground, focusing on those issues. And there's a lot of it. Most people are in this middle area. It is really frustrating to me. And I know a lot of people are upset with the Senate Republicans. They say they're walking out on the job. They're not doing their job. I got to say, I think they are doing their job.
This is their job. Yeah.
A walkout is a part of democracy. If the majority party wants to just run roughshod over you without any input from a huge percentage of the population, that there's a name for that, and that's tyranny of the majority. And I think the one element that we have to protect ourselves from that, in Oregon anyway, is the ability to walk out and deny a quorum. And that's exactly what they did. And the whole idea for that is to compel both sides to get together and to work through these issues and find common ground and focus on common ground. And unfortunately, they're unwilling to do that.
Can't we lay this also at the feet um, of the media? Because if you have a functioning media that fosters public debate, that gives attention to the pros and cons of both sides of the debate, and that's something that the public has access to, and even when they don't, they're still against
Yeah.
the bill. You know, just think if we had a functioning media that actually enlightened voters and gave them a chance to have input. It just seems like, because I don't remember, and you campaigned, others, you know, had to go out and talk to voters and ask for their support. I don't remember them campaigning on this and saying, you know what, we have our highest priority, more important than addressing homelessness and crime and inflation and affordable housing and transportation infrastructure and energy costs and all that stuff. The most important thing is gender affirming care, and I'm willing to go to the mat for that. And the heck with the entire budget, which they haven't passed, right?
I don't understand it, but I think they made some promises. They made some commitments to the financial backers that put them in office, and they're unwilling to go around it. I think some of them kind of regret that. I think they regret tagging this gender affirming thing on this bill, which started out, I believe, as just as an abortion bill. I think they regret not really reading the details. There were senators that didn't realize there were no age limits on abortion. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
In one of the hearings,
gasp, right? The audible gasp.
When one of the legislative attorneys said, no, Senator Knopp is correct. There are no age limits for abortion on this bill. So I think they regret not doing that. I don't know why they don't take care of those issues now.
Yeah, they can fix it. They could talk to their leadership, right? But leadership is kind of all powerful, right? So Rob Wagner, he can just run around and not do anything about anything and just attack people and fine them. And it seems like his leadership career has gotten off to a pretty poor start. But nevertheless, now some of the media is starting to beg Republicans, just come back. Come on, come back. It's going to be fine. Yeah. And then they have this AstroTurf thing where they pretend that a bunch of people they've never spoken to came down and just voiced their opinion about Republicans getting back to work the other day at some oversight hearing.
Yeah.
I'm a political operative. I know how you organize those things. And that's what they did.
Right. I'm sure they did. Yeah. It's, this is my first term, so this is all new to me.
Welcome to Salem.
Yeah. Welcome to Salem.
Yeah. But, I think I've watched your remonstrances. I think you acquit yourself very well. Different legislators take on different roles. When you kind of come to the mic and speak, I think you seem to have a calm and sensible way of expressing things about very tough and emotional issues. And that's really necessary. There's obviously other legislators that have similar skill sets, but I don't think we can have too many people doing what you do.
I agree. I think we need to be willing to speak up and speak out on some of these hard issues. And some of them are real difficult, and not everybody's comfortable speaking out on them, especially when it comes to some of these social issues. And I just feel, well, somebody needs to do it. I'll do it.
Well, you're stepping into the breach at the moment when people are paying attention, and I think that's essential. What about the gun bill, the HB 2005?
Yeah, that one, I'm not as worried about that one, simply because it is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
If that passes, it's going to get held up. But there's really three elements to it. One is to ban unserialized guns, what they call ghost guns. And the way it was written originally, it would have made a lot of gun owners criminals right off the bat. And then it has regional bans on where you can carry for people that have concealed carry
Concealed
permits.
carry light. Yeah, the most
The
scrutinized
most
people, the lowest
law-abiding
crime rate, right?
population in the United States.
Yep.
And they're going to make a patchwork of regional regulations. You can be driving in your car and legal, illegal, or walk down the street. Yeah, I'm legal on this block. I'm illegal on this block. It's nonsense. But the most egregious one is raising the age limit to purchase a lot of firearms, not all firearms, but a lot of firearms, raising it to 21. And that's the piece that has a lot of people upset, like me. If you can go fight and die for your country at 18 and vote at 18,
Get married, have
get
kids.
married, yeah, you should be able to fill your constitutional Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, and that's been shown in some other circuit courts where those laws are unconstitutional.
Well, there's no, they compare it to the drinking age, but the thing is, first of all, the drinking age, drinking alcohol is not protected in the United States Constitution by the Second Amendment or anything else.
I wish I had a constitutional right to whiskey, but I don't.
You don't. It's just a product that's bought and sold in commerce. It's not essential to your protection.
So you cannot compare that with a constitutional right. And so the right to keep and bear arms is unique in that way. And we have to respect that right. It has to be balanced against other things. And I just err on the side of, law-abiding people have the right to keep and bear arms. And if you're going to put a gun, if you're going to restrict guns, show me how it's going to keep it away from the bad guys, but let the good guys keep their guns. And that's really tough to do.
Yeah, they haven't been able to explain how people who don't follow laws are going to be affected by a law, and how they're not going to impair the ability of people who follow laws to protect themselves.
And one thing that is very frustrating to me, and a lot of us, when I go to the Capitol, I have to go through a metal detector. Even from the private garage, I go into a keyed garage, I park, I still have to go through a metal detector. There's security all around that place. But yet, when we talk about putting school resource officers in our schools, putting metal detectors at the doors, no, they won't even hear those bills.
Yeah. Which is crazy.
But they're adamant about protecting themselves in the Capitol. But why not protect our kids in a similar way?
Who are defenseless. They have no ability to defend themselves, and they are whatever can happen in the time it takes for a police officer to respond to something like shots fired or person with gun on campus. We know the whole thing can happen before anyone can get there. So
I know where I put my tax dollars, and that's to protect the kids.
Yeah.
And I hate that this stuff happens. It is horrific. But we have to take practical steps to prevent it. And there are practical steps we can take to make our schools safer.
So those are the two bills. They obviously are more than just a perfunctory change in statute that no one will notice and won't deeply affect people. But it's also interesting how they've decided not only to throw away all the things they say are important, but they just don't want to have a dialogue about maybe finding compromises, which I think there were a lot of close races in this last state legislative session. And I don't remember them in these close races campaigning on this stuff publicly. Did Senator Meek run ads talking about how he was going to make sure that this top priority got passed? Think he would have won that race against Bill Kennemer? I don't.
If he ran on gender affirming care, I don't think he would have won.
No.
Yeah. Or gun bans. I don't know what his campaign was, but you raise a good point, Kevin. The Republicans lost the House by, I think, 5,000 votes.
Yeah.
some of those races were decided by 200 votes. So it's, and the Senate was a similar number of votes. So this state is very divided. But what happens is when it goes an inch one way, it just, unfortunately, it seems to go hard over the progressive side. And even though there's a lot of moderate Democrats, and I see a comment here, why do they hate us? They don't. I know there's a lot of good people in there. I disagree with them. I don't think they hate us. They don't hate anybody, but they have very different perspective on a lot of these issues. A lot of it might be where they live, or their own experiences. But I try and approach it. I want to have conversations on these issues and look at data, talk about how these issues impact real people, and again, try and find common ground.
Especially when you got 4,000 bills at the start of the session, and you got to winnow that down, and it's supposed to get down to bills where there's at least a strong reason to pass them, not to slide them through where the public will never know. And they're certainly paying attention. Now, by the way, one of the things I noticed is that there's quite a discussion going on about the kicker and what is intended by, because I think it's, there was a briefing the other day that some of us got from the leadership of the legislature on the Republican side. And it was, I think the largest kicker in the past was like 1.9 billion, and now it's almost 6 billion.
It is. I don't remember the exact number, but yeah, it is a huge kicker. And there is a bill on the House side, I don't remember the number, that would change how the kicker payouts are done. And so instead of, the whole idea with the kicker is, if you paid more taxes than were needed to operate government, you get those tax dollars back. That makes sense. That's what we voted on. That was the ballot measure way back when.
Yep.
Well, now there's a bill that's been introduced that would divide the kicker up by population. So everybody got the same amount. It's a massive redistribution scheme.
Yeah, it's income redistribution. So it's a socialist kicker.
Yes, it would be a socialist kicker. That is not what we voted for.
No.
That is not what the voters intended. And I don't know where that stands. I think it had a hearing. I have no idea. Well, if it passes in the House, it's just one more reason the Senate shouldn't come back, to make sure that thing never.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
And that that if it passed, it would be a referendum on the ballot. So it would become a ballot measure.
Yeah.
But if it is passed by the House and the Senate, it doesn't have to go through the normal petition process and signature gathering process. It goes right to a ballot measure. So if you really want to do that, go out and gather signatures and bring it up.
Yeah.
But there's no way I'm going to vote to bring that to the voters.
There was a House Joint Resolution 29. I got to watch what's called a remonstrance, and for some of the folks watching, I believe that's usually at the end of the day, isn't it? Or sometimes at the beginning, you get to come up and you speak in general to some of the legislation that you're advocating for and against, and and it's a very important time, because sometimes those are the things where where it's not actual debate; it's just you're making a case for something. It's not a pro and con, but it's important because these things end up on the public record. People see them on the news. And there was one that you did for House Joint Resolution 29, which I found very interesting, which people might, when they hear this with this joint resolution, is like, oh, that's not already the case. Why don't you go ahead and describe that one?
Yeah. So what happened, there was I think it was a Supreme Court case that said all basically serious crimes needed to have unanimous verdicts to unanimous guilty verdicts. Oregon was one of 2 states that didn't have unanimous guilty verdicts. I think it was Oregon and Louisiana. I don't know how we got there, but that's the way it was. So Oregon changed the practice to where all guilty, this is something that just recently happened where it went into place. All guilty verdicts now require a unanimous jury. Well, what we didn't do is change our acquittal process. So now acquittals don't require unanimous. So some of us felt, well, that doesn't seem fair. So let's rewrite the law. And actually, the law had never been rewritten, and it's a real simple change. You just say guilty verdicts are unanimous and acquittals must be unanimous for these types of serious crimes. And so we brought that to the floor, and it was voted down. It was part of a set of safety bills, public safety bills that we pushed to the floor with Representative Kevin Mannix. But it's a very simple bill. It's like 3 words in a existing law that I think is 1 page long, 2 pages long.
It just puts it to a vote of the people, right? Because it's a joint resolution. Is that correct?
This would have been, that's a good question on this. I don't think this had to be referred to the people.
It was just a statutory change. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember now why it had to be a joint resolution. But I didn't think it had to be referred to the voters. I may be wrong on that.
And to understand why that's important, I think you were describing to me before we went live here, that there are examples of people who have been hurt by this, where it's skewed in favor of protecting criminals, but then victims actually are the ones that get kind of re-victimized.
Well, the sad thing is I'm looking up a story that was just shared to me over the weekend. So there was a case in Polk County that had to be retried. It was 2 counts of sex abuse and 2 counts of sexual penetration. This case was tried in 2013, did not get a unanimous jury verdict, but the person was found guilty. The strange thing is, this was just retried recently, unanimous guilty verdict this time, but the judge sentenced the person to 7 years less than his current conviction. And the sad thing is, this young girl who was 7 at the time of the offense is now 18, had to relive this whole thing and go back to a trial and do it all over again. So this whole thing is a travesty for the victims, and the offenders are getting free attorneys, free appeals, all this stuff. And this is just one case. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of them.
Well, this addresses, you mentioned public safety, right? I mean, and what we expect from a justice system. And that was something that people campaigned on. That was something that they said they wanted to address in the last election on both sides of the aisle. And I'm not seeing it this election cycle.
There is some money that will go toward the state police, the jails. There is some money going out to law enforcement. But what a lot of us were looking for is putting some teeth in ballot measure 110, for example, holding people accountable for crime. And there's really been very little, if anything, done on that. And ballot measure 110, for example, I've dug into that. I'm on the Behavioral Health and Healthcare Committee.
Yep.
The Oversight and Accountability Council for ballot measure 110, their focus is on minimizing the stigma of drug use, providing harm reduction like free needles and education on how to do drugs safely. And if you're going to use fentanyl, make sure you do it with friends and they have some Narcan. Harm reduction. and then also like short-term drug treatment. They are not doing any long-term residential treatment. There is some efforts to do that, but that is not even a focus of Ballot Measure 110, folks. When you voted for Ballot Measure 110, I voted no because I saw this coming, but a lot of people who did vote for it, it was the Drug Addiction Treatment and Recovery Act. They expected people to be treated for addiction, not destigmatize addiction, not in a way, we're just normalizing it.
We're normalizing it. And of course, we're ending incarceration as we know it while we're at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
and I've seen, if you follow Kevin Dahlgren, if you don't follow,
Yep.
he's, I saw some of the things he did. I met with him. I brought him to Salem to look at the homeless situation in Salem. He's just got a real common sense approach. He goes out and visits with all these folks. He holds them accountable. Yeah, we do need treatment facilities, but there can be levels of expectation to go into those facilities. But the way we're going, we're going to spend millions of dollars building homes with no expectation to get treatment or recovery. No loosening of our civil commitment laws. It's almost impossible to get anybody civilly committed. Even a close family member finds it difficult to get someone they love civilly committed to get the help that they deserve. So we've got a lot of issues on that front that we have to work through it. And that's where I found a lot of disagreements in the House. When you start talking about holding people accountable for their behavior, they're
not into accountability. No.
They feel they're very motivated to be tolerant of others, and I get it. But I've also talked to a lot of recovered drug addicts, and if some guy's laying homeless and squalor on the street, and you go up to him, you need help, and he says no, leaving him is not tolerant and accepting.
No,
that is the drugs talking. That is callous neglect. I mean, the example I give folks, if that was your mom laying there rotting away on the sidewalk and she didn't want you to pick her up, would you just leave her there? No, you would drag her kicking and screaming to a treatment facility so she could get the help she needs and get in her right mind.
But you're the one in Oregon who would get arrested for doing that.
Yeah.
Which is just insane. It means that they're trying to cut out the family support network, even if there is one.
Yes, they make it very difficult. And I've talked to some folks who have tried to get their family members committed, and it's impossible. Even not even just get committed, but get the services and support they need.
Yeah.
I talked to a mom in my district who went through this frustrating effort with her son, her adult son. She could not get him in a place and get treatment until she was given custody of him, basically.
Wow.
She had
lengthy legal process.
It was a legal process, and then she had some say, and she was successful. But it's also this patchwork of different groups that you're having to deal with. Some parts are done by the county, some are by the state, and everybody has a vested interest not to take care of that person because they foot the bill. If they're in the state hospital, somebody else foots the bill. If they're in the jail, then the county foots the bill. It's just, our system is really disconnected. There's nobody in charge of it.
It seems like it's poorly designed and not well led. And yet there's gobs of money, right? But we're 50th in the country in drug treatment. We're number one in the use of the top three drugs that are killing people: P2P meth, fentanyl, and heroin.
Yeah.
So that's not what you want to be good at.
And these are highly, highly addictive drugs. And they're doing meth especially is causing mental illness. You're not going to be taking this for a while and then decide, no, I'm going to quit. No, you're not in your right mind. And if we don't recognize that and be willing to accept, yeah, you know what? We need to compel somebody to go get treatment. We have to be willing to do that.
And when you said about harm reduction, what about the harm that's being done to places like the city of Portland or many other towns around the state where businesses can't function? They're overwhelmed with like crime, burglaries, thefts, car thefts. I mean, Portland's like the national capital for car theft and chop shops that spontaneously show up in places. I think I just saw that 20 more people were arrested from some car theft ring. And it's so pervasive now, and that is harm. It's not just the people that are doing that; it's the communities that are now being laid to waste, and their economic vitality is being hollowed out.
And not only the communities, but the family members of these folks. It is not, when they make this decision to harm themselves, they're also harming others. You're absolutely right. And there are businesses leaving Portland on a regular basis. Anybody with any income is leaving Portland as well, not only for the crime and homelessness, but some of the counties, the outrageous tax levels they have. I've talked to several of them.
Affordability.
They're moving to Vancouver
because
they're tired of the taxes that aren't doing any good where they live, and they're just getting out of there. So there's a reckoning coming. And all of Oregon, we need a healthy Portland. We need a vibrant Portland and a safe Portland. The whole state does, because it's going to rub off on everybody if we don't get Portland taken care of.
And we need people to listen even to a minority of the population who happen to live elsewhere than where they live, because 13 counties want a divorce right now, which is not a good sign for any state when a third of your counties want to leave and become part of another state.
I know. That's not a good, there's your sign that you might be doing things wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not representing all the people in your state. Maybe you should give local communities a little more control over their own destiny. And that's a big problem that Oregon has.
Which, we're both in the Willamette Valley, but you've got some rural areas, part of your district.
I do, yeah.
But I think you can probably see both sides of it very closely. But this is a problem for the state that goes beyond just a dispute over a couple of bills, which are phenomenally bad. It is a dysfunction that I think the people running the state need to come to terms with, don't they? Soon.
Yes. I do see it as the state and the state legislature understanding and accepting that not everybody sees it their way, and let people at the county level, let them at the city level decide what their destiny is. What do they want their city to look like 10 years from now? What do they want their county to look like in the future? Let them have control over that.
Yeah.
Let them have a little more control over their schools. So there's a lot of things, but the tendency is for more and more to centralize more and more decision making, and to make very onerous regulations and then rules at the statewide agency levels, instead of just letting people decide. It also the natural resources. I had in the Santiam Canyon just horrendous wildfires, 700 homes destroyed, and I see that, and I was right in the middle of all that wildfire recovery effort, and it killed me because that did not have to happen. That was
preventable.
It was preventable, and you can't just say, "Well, it's warmer now. We can't do anything." No, yes, it is warmer. Acknowledge it, and eliminate the fuels in the forest.
Yeah, eliminate the fuel load. Even more important, right?
It's 30 years of gross mismanagement of that forest. A lot of it is federal forest.
Yeah.
30 years of gross mismanagement. and then letting a wildfire burn, which that wildfire could have easily been put out, except for a disastrous call by our governor.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, this is that's why elections are important, but I think that's why also standing up and standing firm and speaking out and making things clear in the state legislature, like you're doing, like so many others, you know, it really changes our lives if you guys are able to get more reasonable policies coming out of Salem and more affordable government for that matter, since you know that kicker is really needed, I think, by some people right now.
It's actually it really is needed with the inflation we have, and it is actually something that Oregon does reasonably well. As we have a balanced budget, we give excess taxes back to the taxpayer. That's pretty unique, and I want to make sure we continue and respect that for sure.
One last question. I know we've kind of gone a bit long tonight, but that's always the sign of a really good show. I got to say that because I'm just wrapped up in it here with hearing your thoughts and kind of sharing these ideas back and forth. What's a good bill that you think you guys have come together on, or it could be more than one, that you really want to see make it through as well? Something that's like the positive, like this could still happen and this would be great.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a few ones that we worked very hard on, and they were closer to home. One was a bill that I introduced one on the House side. Senator Girod, who covers my district, worked it on the Senate side, but it would have provided property tax relief for homeowners that lost their homes in the wildfires and rebuilt. So a lot of folks had pretty old homes. They were all paid off. You know, the property taxes were fairly reasonable. And when they rebuilt, even on the same footprint, some of them doubled, tripled their taxes. After being through all the crap that they went through, that just didn't seem very fair. So we had some discussions with the folks at Marion County, came up with an approach that would give them some tax relief, and every county in the state could implement it at their discretion. And I think that's a great bill. I really want to see that, and I think it does have bipartisan support. I had another bill that we're releasing folks early out of Oregon State Hospital. We never got into the Mossman order. If you follow.
Oh, I know what that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a sad thing. A court order says if this person who's in the state hospital is not mentally fit to aid and assist in their own defense by a certain timeline, you got to let them out anyway, because we got more in the queue that need to go get treatment. That is a sad statement for our mental health system right there.
Yeah.
So what's going on is these people are getting released, their charges are being dismissed, and then hopefully they're seeking treatment somewhere else, but not necessarily. So I had a bill that would just make sure that they weren't left in Marion County, that they went back to their county of jurisdiction and would go through the courts there.
And that's because the Oregon State Hospital
is in Marion County, is in Salem. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that bill had bipartisan support. And then I had another bill. This one I'm real happy with. You know, it's not a big deal, but I had a bill that is sitting on the House or the Senate floor right now that would allow one gas station in Oregon to have 24/7 self-serve, and that's in the city of Detroit.
Oh, right.
Because that city got devastated.
Yeah.
And the lady that owns the Rivers Run gas station, she's 75. She spent $500,000 to put new pumps in and new state-of-the-art self-serve pumps.
Yeah.
She's finding a heck of a hard time hiring people.
Right.
In a town that has been devastated like that. And in an area that it provides a vital service, not only for emergency vehicles in that area, but for travelers.
I think we've all driven through there and thought, I should have filled up my tank.
You got it. Yeah.
Back in Salem, but it's running low now.
So I was able to get bipartisan support for that. I even had the one employee she has testify in support of the bill. But it's not a huge deal, but we were happy. That means a lot for Detroit and the people in my district. So
Well, that's why you mentioned so
yeah,
the themes there were kind of local control, listening to constituents, solving problems where the government might be in the way of doing something
yeah,
that's totally common sense, right? And bringing some relief to people who have been in very difficult situations. Those are all really good. I appreciate those are really good examples of, and I like to throw in the positive at the end of the
yeah,
show if at all possible, because um, I do hope that we find a way to resolve what's going on with the legislature, but it's bigger than just a legislative session. I think now everybody understands that, don't they?
it is. But I will say we are going to have a budget. There are some good things in the budget that are coming out. I mentioned residential treatment facilities. We will be putting some money toward more long-term residential treatment facilities, which we desperately need. Some of those facilities are oriented toward kids and youth. We need those as well. So there's some good things that'll be happening in the budget. Not everything, but and we will come together and pass a budget. It's constitutionally required. I don't know when that'll be, but it'll be before September.
Yep. Might be special session or something like that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that they'll realize they got to get their priorities right, which is actually not a bad byproduct of this whole thing.
Right.
Which would be great. Well, thanks so much for joining us here tonight. I'm glad we finally got a chance to have you on. It's been a real pleasure.
We started talking about this a long time ago, so I really appreciate it. And anytime, thank you.
We'd love to have you back on, and best of luck with everything that you're fighting for and working hard for in the legislature. And just know that when you're up there, a lot of people see what you're doing, and they really support what you're doing, and appreciate what you're doing, even though I'm sure at times it just doesn't feel that great in the.
I appreciate hearing that, because there's a lot of times you just feel like you're getting beat up.
Well, we got your back.
It helps to know that that there's people out there that are supportive. Yeah. Thank you.
Representative Deal, thank you so much for joining us. We will be there and be watching, and love to have you back and hear some more, especially if we get some of these things passed down the road. It would be great to say where are we heading next? What are we going to do next? And maybe what can we solve? So that'd be great. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great evening. Thanks everyone for watching our show. Okay. And please share it with everyone you can. We're on Rumble now too, because our YouTube thing syncs over to Rumble. So you'll see that here this evening, and you can share it with pretty much anybody, whether they're on social media or not. So have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow night with the next episode of The Captive Audience. We should have Senator Finley on tomorrow.
All right.
So we'll get the Senate side tomorrow, and we'll make sure you know what's happening over there. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, Kevin, and everybody.